So here's the agenda for this evening. Number one, if it's okay with you guys, we'll be on SEC TV. The Ropers are here today to tape this for public access television. We think the issue of gun violence in our community is pretty important. So, and we, at the last meeting, for those of you that were here in, let's see, that was March, we had a pretty good-sized March meeting. And folks said, and I took notes, we want to do more on gun control. We want an educator, and I wrote all these down. We want somebody who's an expert, perhaps an attorney. And then we had a lobbyist from Citizens Climate Lobby who said, you know, having a lobbyist is really good too. And so we got somebody tonight who's all that, and has traveled across the state to be here. So in just a little bit, we're going to bring him up. So in any case, but I do want, we always mark our calendars first. So if anybody wants to mark their calendars, we're going to put these on our website as we always do. So if you don't have your pad paper, that's okay. We're going to talk a little bit about elections in a while, as you can imagine, over the next few months, up until November. So there is a door knocking training. You thought you knew. You did not. We're going to review. And perhaps for those of you that stay late, the doorbell ringing training and canvas with Martha Marks. I met Martha Marks a few weeks ago, and very nice person. And so I can imagine that they're going to run a great show. And then it's Saturday, June 9th from 10 to 12 p.m. At the New London Public Library. So again, that's Saturday, June 9th. And this is for those of you who feel like, okay, I want to be part of that wave. That wave has started. That wave has started to gather momentum, if you believe in that wave, because they don't just suddenly appear on election day. They have to begin somewhere. And so they're beginning with these organizations that are doing training. So if you want to truly be a part of whatever wave is coming, this is a great place to start. Saturday, June 9th, 10 to 12 at the New London Public Library.
What time is that?
That is 10 to 12. That's 10 in the morning, 10 a.m. till lunchtime.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's making fun of me because I put 5 p.m. in the outside.
Let's clarify.
Thank you. So that's, I did that on purpose. I made that mistake in the heading of 5 p.m. instead of 7 p.m. Because I wanted to reiterate that we are a grassroots organization. And those folks make mistakes. So we thought that would help. Another thing on our calendar, Tuesday, June 19th is our next RiseUpMystic meeting. It'll be much smaller. Tuesday, June 19th. We don't expect a huge turnout, frankly, because June, July, and August, let's face it, right? Baseball, Little League, we all got 1,000 things to do. However, we can take a small group and we can do some good work with our letter writing campaigns. And so we will do a writer's workshop. And that's where we sit down and we try to get into the newspapers whatever issues we think are important to us. And that'll carry over into election time. So that's Tuesday, June 19th, right here, 7 to 8:30, same time, same batch. Jeremy, are we almost ready? What do you think? Pretty good?
Yeah, I think we just need to check.
All right, we got a man to do that. So we're going to turn this over to Jeremy Stein, all the way from Ridgefield, Connecticut. That's like 5 hours away. So, 5.5. Jeremy Stein, and he's going to put on a PowerPoint presentation. You asked for somebody that was expert on guns and gun safety and community safety and things that we can do to prevent gun violence. So I'll turn it over to Jeremy, and thank you very much.
So thank you for having me here. I traveled 8.5 hours to get here, right? 8.5, 9 hours if you count Waterbury. So I am the new executive director for Connecticut Against Gun Violence. I started in January. My first week was, I started a little bit earlier, so my first week was the Las Vegas shooting. My second week was the Sutherland Springs shooting. The Parkland shooting happened shortly after that, and then on and on. And we are still dealing with this issue. And I'm here today to tell you about Connecticut Against Gun Violence, what we do, what I do, and what you can do. And that's really the most important piece about this, is what can you do. Everyone here is here to learn about what they can do to end gun violence. This is something that we need to do together. It's not just one organization that needs to do this. It's everyone in this country, on this planet, has to do their part to try to make our children and our families and everyone safer in our community. So we have been around for 25 years. We were founded in 1993. It started from a shooting that happened in Bridgeport, Connecticut. There was a 17-year-old that was shot. Two women decided that they had heard enough. They didn't want this to happen anymore. There were people hiding in their bathtubs at that time because they thought that they were so afraid of stray bullets that the only safe place was to hide in their bathtubs. And they formed this organization. 25 years later, we're still fighting gun violence. And literally, actually I was corrected. It didn't start in their kitchen. It actually started in their living room. So I need to make that correction. But what we're dealing with is there are 33,000 gun deaths every year. Every time I read that number, I always have to look at it again because it just doesn't seem right when I say 33,000 gun deaths every year, 91 every year. So there have been more Americans killed by guns in the past 50 years than have died in all of the wars in the U.S. history. And the most recent statistic that I heard was that more people have died this year alone than in war overseas. This is, by the end of this year, more people will have died in the last couple of years than the Vietnam conflict. So this is a very serious problem. So what we have here is a map of all the incidents, the gun-related incidents that happened in 2018. That is just this year. Each one of those little dots is a gun-related incident. And if you look down, this is, I actually haven't even updated this. This is just until April 26th. So that does not even include this month that we're in yet. So gun violence is pervasive in our country, unfortunately. So Americans are 25 times more likely to be shot and killed with a gun than people in other developed countries. So when people talk about mental health issues, our mental health issues are no different than mental health issues in other countries. So you have to ask yourself, well, what is the difference? Why are there so many gun-related shootings in our country if we have the same amount of mental health in other countries? And you have to ask yourself, well, maybe it's the ease of access of guns. Maybe it's the number of guns. And what we are dealing with is a health crisis. This is no different than cancer. This is no different than smoking. This is a health crisis. People in this country are dying at an alarming rate. It is increasing in number. And the AMA has called gun violence a public health crisis. And I'm going backwards. That's a new one. So mass shootings and school shootings. This is what most people are familiar with. This is what's in the media. This is how a lot of people have gotten involved in gun violence prevention. This is a picture from the Las Vegas shooting. This was a concert where 58 people, concert goers, were killed by a man using a bump stock, which I will get to. The most recent famous shooting was on Valentine's Day. And this was the Parkland shooting in Stoneman Douglas High School, where 17 people were killed. And I show this photo because if you remember the photos from the Newtown shooting, there is almost an identical picture of the students coming out of the school. And it is very eerie to look at that picture and this picture in comparison of the students marching out of school while there is an active shooter on campus, while there is military. And of course, this is where a lot of people became involved in Connecticut, was after the Sandy Hook shooting on December 14, 2012. My wife is from Sandy Hook. I was a first responder in Newtown. Newtown was the first, actually Sandy Hook was the first place I moved to when I moved to Connecticut 15 years ago. And I just want you to take a second and look at the faces that are in these photos. And I get choked up every time I look at this. I deal with a lot of the families, a lot of the survivors, but I mean, when you look at the faces of these children, they are babies. These are babies. And these lives were ended in a matter of minutes because of someone who had ease of access to an assault weapon and had a mental health issue. And this is what he had access to, or similar gun. This is the AR-15. This is probably the gun that most people are familiar with when they're talking about assault weapons. And the reason why I show this is to educate people, because I think this is about education. It's about people knowing what it is that the AR-15 looks like. And it's not just a scary looking gun. The story behind the AR-15 is that this was a gun that was originally designed by a man named Eugene Stoner. And he originally designed the AR-15 for the Vietnam conflict. It's slightly different. The modern AR-15 is slightly different. It's been civilianized. It doesn't have a carry handle. But this gun was originally designed for war. Eventually they went to the M16, which is a very similar gun, but Eugene Stoner also, I believe he was also designed the AK-47 or the M16. I have to remember. But more than 210,000 students have been exposed to gun violence since Potluck. There was a recent report in the Washington Post. More than 187,000 students when it came out, and now it's more, and actually the number is even growing. And this has to do with the number of children that are in schools while there is a shooting going on. These are not necessarily people that have been shot at, but these are children in schools while there is an active shooting going on. And we can't really talk about gun violence unless we're going to address urban gun violence as well. Violence in our cities, gang violence. This is something, when I first started my career as an attorney 23 years ago, I was a prosecutor. I worked in DC, and I worked very closely with the ATF. And back then, we were worried about gun violence in a city where you weren't allowed to have guns. People were killing each other with guns, over drugs, over turf, over beefs, and we still really need to reduce violence in our cities, in Bridgeport, in Haven, and Hartford, and it doesn't get as much media attention. When you're talking about gun violence, you hear a lot about the mass shootings, but you don't hear about the guy that was murdered in Hartford, or the 7 people that have been murdered in Hartford this year. There have been 28 people killed in the state of Connecticut this year alone, and you don't hear a lot about it. So, the same article, they reported that 62% of students exposed to gun violence since 1999 were children of color. Black students make up 16.6% of the school population, but they experience school shootings at twice that rate. So there is a racial element to this as well. And we're talking about school shootings such as Trayvon Martin. Black males accounted for 22% of all people shot and killed in 2017. President Obama had this famous quote, this could have been my son that was shot by the police. And not so long ago, a year ago, Jason Negron in Bridgeport was fatally shot by the police as well. We need to, what we try to do is, we're trying to bring the communities together. We're trying to bring urban communities and the police together so they can work together, so that police are better educated about de-escalation, so that the communities learn to trust the police, and police learn to trust the citizens as well. It's a two-way street, but certainly the police have the upper hand. They are armed with guns, and not all incidents really need a police officer to discharge a weapon. And then the big number that is often forgotten is suicides. Suicides account for 2/3 of all gun deaths. 2/3 of all gun deaths. So who is CAGB? All right. Well, we have a very simple mission. Reduce gun violence in Connecticut. It's pretty easy to understand. You would think that everybody would be in favor of this, right? Everybody. And so, is everyone in favor of this? Do you think everyone is in favor of this? I got some prizes, by the way, so I'm just gonna, I like to give out some prizes. So anyone have an answer? Is everyone in favor of reducing gun violence in Connecticut? Well, that's an easy one. All right, so how do we do this? We enact and protect safety laws, we ensure the effective administration of laws that we have, and we support non-legislative means to reduce gun violence. And what have we done? Well, we've lobbied some of the strongest gun laws in the state of Connecticut and in the country. We were behind the 1993 assault weapons ban. We were only the third state to do it at the time. We helped pass the first gun seizure law after the 1998 lottery shooting. In 2007, we helped pass a law that required the immediate reporting of stolen guns to assist police in acquiring guns and finding guns that were in the black market. After the Sandy Hook tragedy, we worked closely with the legislature and enacted universal background checks, expanded weapons ban, limited large capacity magazines. We collaborated with domestic advocates to close the loopholes on domestic abusers, and on and on and on. And most recently, tomorrow, the governor is going to be signing the bump stock ban. So that's what we need to so briefly, I will just breeze through this. I know it's law, so this is where everyone goes to sleep, unfortunately. But no, it's very important to understand. What we're talking about is the Second Amendment. That is often the argument. Well, I'm defending my rights against the Second Amendment. I'm a strong advocate of the Second Amendment. But you can't understand the Second Amendment, and I have a Constitution over here in case anyone wants to know what it says. I always bring it. And the way that the Second Amendment starts out with the word, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the rights of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That is the Second Amendment. It is the only amendment that starts with the regulation or taking the what the right is and kind of reducing it and qualifying. So there is this qualifier about a well-regulated militia that starts out. Now you have to understand that the people who crafted the Constitution, they were very educated, and language meant something back then. Just like it does in Twitter today, right? Yeah. So they thought about this, they crafted it. Language was really important back then, and they did this purposely. They started this amendment with the words a well-regulated militia because they were talking about the regulation of a militia. Now, the Supreme Court interpreted this as the most recent interpretation in 2008, and what they have said is that this is not an unlimited right. The right to bear arms is not absolute. Like most rights, the Second Amendment is not unlimited, and the states under this decision have a right to regulate gun ownership. And what the Keller decision says is it says, and this is the issue that they were deciding, does someone have a right, a personal right to own a gun, or is this a right that the militia has? This really applies to militia. What the Supreme Court has said is no, this is an individual right, and that right is paramount in the home for the purpose of defending your home. So the Supreme Court has said in this decision that yes, you have a right to have a gun, you have a right to have it in your house, and you have the right to have it to defend your home, and everything past that is up to the states to regulate. So when someone says I have a right to have an AR-15 in my, to carry this in public, and that is my right under the Second Amendment, they are 100% absolutely wrong. That is not their right under the Second Amendment. Justice Scalia, one of the most conservative justices on the bench, even says prohibition on carrying concealed weapons were lawful under the Second Amendment, and that the states do have a right to regulate this. And just this decision is full of information about how the states have a right to regulate. So when people say Second Amendment, it is often misunderstood what this right exactly is. So despite their Second Amendment right, the real issue we're talking about is not your right to own a gun, but the other argument you hear often is, well, I need the gun to protect myself because it makes me safer, right? How many people have heard that, right? I need the gun to defend my home, I have a right to defend my home. And statistic after statistic, study after study shows that the numbers just don't add up, that you are not safer with a gun in your home. You are not. And in fact, there's an 80% chance of an unintentional firearm death of children under 15 occurring in the home if you own a firearm. You are 3 times more likely to have a homicide in your home. There's a 3 to 5 times greater likelihood of a suicide by gun being in your house. And you're 4 times more likely to have an accidental death if you own a gun in your house. And so the reality is that owning a gun does not make you safer. It makes you feel safer for some people, but it does not make you safer. And I think that that is a very important distinction. So let's look at the stats. How often do people use guns in self-defense? Anybody know what the statistic is? All right, rarely. That is a statistical. So according to Harvard, when the National Crime Victimization Survey, people defended themselves with a gun 0.9% of the time between 2007 and 2011. 0.9%, not even 1% of people defending themselves with a gun. And then, of course, does everyone know him, Wayne LaPierre, RUM, you know? The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is with a good guy with a gun, right? Wrong, you know. So here's a little test. So who wants to take this test? There's a prize in it if you get it right. Anyone? Anyone want? Someone raise your hand? Yes, you, sir, representative. So all right. Here's the test. One of these guys is a good guy with a gun. Right? The other guy, and he's exercising what he believes is the Second Amendment right. The other guy is about to shoot up a school. All right. Is guy A the good guy, or is guy B?
Clearly, the guy on the left.
The guy on the left. You are correct. No, so here's a CAGV thing. I wasn't kidding. I got prizes, folks. I got T-shirts. It's like Wonderama in here. Do you guys know what Wonderama is? Oh, maybe it's a New York thing. It's prizes for kids. Like, that's all you need to know. So, kids are people too? Yes? Anybody? Anybody hear this?
Yes.
It's a tough crowd. All right. So why is it different now? Well, we have these amazing youths now. There is a youth movement going on, and you know the youth of America. They're chanting, "It's not one more." And this is Emma Gonzalez, and this is a certain crowd that I, you know, when I show this to the youth, they have no idea what I'm talking about. Because many, right? And they're like, "What's a youth?" And then at the end, they come up and they say like, Mr. Stein, what is a youth? You know, so you know, we're talking about youths, right? So the youth of America, they're unstoppable. They're fueled by coffee and Red Bull, and they have nothing to lose because they know they have everything to lose by going to school. I mean, these are kids who they go to school and they wonder if they're going to live. They're not worried about homework. They're worried about if today is going to be the last day. We have David Hobb, who is from the March for Our Lives, and Emma Gonzalez, and these are amazing youth that survived Hartford. But we also have youth here in Connecticut. We have Isabella Siegel, who is from Wilton, who founded Connecticut Teens Against Gun Violence, and she was somebody that approached my organization literally in tears. And she said, her father came and said, I don't know what to do. My daughter's in her room, she's afraid to go to school, she's crying. After the Parkland shooting, I don't know what to do. And I said, look, use this energy, use these emotions. Let's, get her friends to make a change. Let's do something positive. Let's try to put this into action. Let's not be helpless. Okay? And her organization is going strong. After about a month, she had a rally with about 150 teens in Park and Richfield, and she got senators to show up and state representatives, and they are making a change. This is Skylar Haynes, who was from RAM. Actually, they were all from RAM High School. They had an amazing program where the principal said, I'm going to have a day where I'm not just going to have a march out for a couple hours, but this is going to be a day dedicated to gun violence prevention and to having students voice their opinions about gun violence. We have teens in Hartford. We have teens in Richfield. This amazing youth, Lane Murdoch, she actually came up with the concept of the national walkout. This is a teen that's 16 years old, and she orchestrated a national movement. Will Haskell, who is running for state senate now, he's 21 years old, just graduated from Georgetown University. And then we have Tyler Suarez, who was responsible for organizing the March for Our Lives in Hartford, where 13,000 people showed up. And he's a bit of a rock star. And then I hope this plays. And this is in Kent. And no sound. That's her. Just pretend like everybody's shouting at the top of the line. It's very exciting. Can we get some? Just you shout. No, more. I'll play the video every because I mean, these teams from Kent, they took over the town of Kent and they marched, and there were hundreds and hundreds of teams marching through the streets, chanting, "Not one more." I mean, they are very serious. They're here. They're not going away. These are going to be the next representatives, senators, Congress people, governors. They're here, and they are, they are serious about this. And this is how long we've been dealing with this gun violence problem. So this is 3 generations of gun violence advocates, gun violence prevention advocates. We have a daughter, mother, and grandmother, and the grandmother is actually one of our founders. So this is how long we've had this problem in this country. What do we have in Connecticut here? So we have some very strong laws. We have a background check on all purchases. We require a permit for all carry and eligibility certificates of purchase. You must be 21 years to possess a handgun, 18 for long guns, believe it or not. We prohibit large capacity magazines, which is more than 10 rounds, unless you owned one prior to January 2014, in which you have a grandfathered in. We've banned assault weapons. However, this is not a true ban. You can still legally own an assault weapon if it was purchased before 1994 and you registered it and it was grandfathered in. We require a photo ID for purchase of ammunition and gun permit or certificate. We are a may-issue state, meaning your local law enforcement, after they do a background check and they do investigation, they can refuse to give you a permit. And that's very important. You are not entitled to have a gun for any reason. The law enforcement, they can do an investigation, which is why law enforcement is very important, especially in smaller towns where they know everybody, because if they know somebody's been in trouble, they can say, you're not entitled to a gun permit. We require safe storage, which is interesting, which is one of the things I'm going to be working on in the next legislative session. Our safe storage law could be a lot better. It only applies to loaded weapons and only applies to minors defined as 16 years or under. So what this means, think about this. What this means is that in Connecticut, you can actually have a loaded AR-15. You can leave it on your kitchen table, and you can leave the house while your high school senior is in the house with his friends. And that is 100% legal in Connecticut, and we still say we have a safe storage law. So I want you to think about that. So I'm going to come to you again at the next session. I'm going to remind you about this. And so one of the things that we can do, and what you can do, is write your legislators, encourage them to change our safe storage laws, because these shootings that are happening in Santa Fe, and I mean, what's happening here is we have teenagers who are getting access to their parents' firearms, right? And then they're saying, well, I have a shotgun legally. I don't know how we got the gun. Well, you got the gun because you didn't lock it up, right? We had an incident in Wilton where somebody had 35 assault weapons. 35 assault weapons, and their child made a threat that he was going to kill one of his teachers. This happened just this past year. Now, luckily, the parents had gun safes, and they locked these things up. And so they were responsible gun owners. But not all gun owners are responsible, and not all, and all gun owners should. They should all be required to lock these. And if you lose your firearm, you have to report it within 72 hours. We also have what's called a gun violence protection order, or a risk warrant. In Connecticut, it's called a risk warrant. You've heard it called red flag laws or extreme risk protection orders. And what this law does is it allows you to petition the police. Go to your local police and you say, my neighbor or my loved one or my family member is at risk to harm himself or others. He's suicidal, or he's being threats, or I think he's not right, or whatever. I think we need to, he has guns or she has guns, we need to remove these from the house. They can immediately petition the court to get an order to get these guns out of the house. And then that person would have to go and petition the court to get them back after showing that they were responsible enough and mentally sane enough to own these weapons. But it's a very important law. It's been used many, many times. It's saved hundreds of, if not thousands of lives. And it's very important for all the states to have it. A lot of these states are slowly starting to enact these things that are called ERPOs, Extreme Risk Protection Order, in a lot of states. And this can also help domestic violence. So, actually I have to change this. We are now the third strongest gun laws in the country because New Jersey did such a good job of passing some very prolific gun laws, and we have the fifth lowest gun death rate. The Giffords organization gives us an A-, which is a very good score. So good score, like I said, third strongest in the country. And then without looking at the map, does anybody know what Florida's gun laws are? Anybody? Yes, anyway, sir, what do you think?
Probably the worst.
What do you think? What's a grade? Your teacher?
An F.
An F, yes, you get a pin.
What's the first? Is it
California,
Oh, right.
New Jersey, and then Connecticut, and then I think Massachusetts or New York. I can't remember which. And why is that important? Why is the grading important? Because 7 of the states with the strongest gun laws also have the lowest death rates, gun death rates. So what does that mean? That means strong gun laws work. Right? You have stronger gun laws, you're going to have lower gun death rates. And just as by way of example from this graph here, this is pre-Sandy Hook. This is before the Sandy Hook laws were enacted. And then if you look at immediately following, we have this drop down significantly. And then they've kind of gone up, but they're still lower than they ever were. And when you're talking about this, in 2012, we had 115 gun homicides. And in 2016, we had 53. What's also interesting is that the orange is suicides. Suicides. And it has gone down, but not enough. And I'm going backwards. And there's Florida. Oops. And so, why do we care about Florida? Like, why do we care what other states grade are? Right? We're safe in Connecticut. We control our borders, right? We got these walls that the president's going to build. So we're worried about it because guns come from other places. And when you're looking at guns from other places, you look at this list that the ATF has, and when they recover guns and it's not in Connecticut, they find out where it's from. And the largest amount of guns are coming from out of state are coming from Florida with bad gun laws, or Maine with weak gun laws, or Georgia with weak gun laws. And so that's why we care about other states. So that's why there does need to be some work on the national level, a lot of work on the national level. And so when we're talking about non-legislative initiatives, we're talking about things like Project Longevity. Project Longevity is an amazing organization. They work out of Hartford, Bridgeport, and New Haven. They target gang violence. It's a carrot and stick approach where they say, if you are not going to get on board with our program, which is to get you services, get you all the things you need, jobs, job training, lighting, whatever it is, healthcare, daycare, we will help you find these things so you can better your community. But if you resort to gun violence, we're not only going to target you, we're going to target all of your associates, anybody you're on Facebook with, anybody that's on your list on your phone. We will target them and we will prosecute them and we will arrest them. This has been known to reduce gun violence by as much as 60%. So it is a very important project. So what did we do this year? Connecticut gun violence, one of the main things that we do is we lobby. I'm a lobbyist. And I literally write the laws in Connecticut. I wrote the bump stock ban. I also wrote the gun stock ban legislation. We educate the public. And the first bill that we have, which is going to be signed tomorrow, we hope, is the bump stock ban. If you're not familiar, this was the device that was used in the Las Vegas shooting that was responsible for being used to kill 58 people in a matter of seconds, minutes rather, 1,100 rounds in just 10 minutes. And this is what a bump stock is. It's this yellow thing right here. It's a piece of plastic. It has a little spring in it, and it basically uses the recoil of the gun to allow you to pull the trigger similar to that of a machine gun. And then we have the ghost gun bill. How many people know what a ghost gun is? So this is one of the scariest sites on the website. This is ghostguns.com. What this enables you to do is you can go online and you can build your own gun. So this gives you a gun that is 80% complete. The lower part of the gun, it has little holes in it. You can go on YouTube and they can show you how to build it, but the gun basically comes in pieces. If you have a drill, you can make your own gun. What's scary is that you can build, I don't know if you can see, but it says AR-15. Over here, this says AK-47. You can build those guns, and you can do this in the privacy of your own home, and it does not require a background check. You can buy this without a permit. All you need is a credit card to buy these things. They're not even checking age. And you can just go online and order these things. It's legal in Connecticut, and it is legal in the rest of the country. This is not considered a firearm under federal or state law because of the lower part of the gun is only 80% complete. So this is a loophole. We were trying to pass this law to just close up this loophole. That's all we were trying to do. We weren't even trying to ban these things. We were just trying to regulate. All we wanted to do was change the definition in Connecticut of what a firearm is to include these things so that people who wanted to build their own guns could, but they needed a permit to do it. They needed a background check to do it, just like any other gun. If you want to buy a gun in Connecticut, you can't mail order a gun, completed gun, unless you have a federal firearms license. So why should you be able to build and order like the gun parts if you can't buy the gun itself? So we had the support, we had the votes in both the House and the Senate. And the House refused to call, they didn't call the bill. I won't say refused, but they didn't call the bill. They said they ran out of time. They were worried about the long debate, and they didn't know if they could fit it in. They had other priorities. So I won't say that they refused, but it never got called, despite the fact that we had a vote. So we would like to concentrate on this in the next session. There may be other things we want to prioritize above this, but we think this is something that's very significant, and it hasn't been able to no state has really addressed this issue. This is such a novel issue. California tried to do it, but their governor didn't sign the bill because he felt that this was that definition of what a ghost gun is too vague. So we did a lot of research, and I think we got it right, and we could have passed it, but it just was one of these things. Somebody's going to have to explain to me why you can only pass one gun law per session, but I'm very curious to know why we couldn't pass this. So how can you help? You can lobby your elected officials. When this comes rolling around, you can say, we want you to pass ghost guns. We want you to ban bump stocks. You can write to them. You can email them. You can call them by phone. You can go in person to Hartford and knock on their doors. You can make an appointment, have town halls, or do exactly what you're doing today by having this session. You can participate in a public rally. There were two just this past couple of months, the National Walkout, March for Our Lives, and then there is a Wear Orange event that's going on this Saturday in Newtown. And it's just to draw attention to gun violence prevention, to the plight of gun violence. There are many Wear Orange events around the state. There's going to be one, I think, at Stanford, and Niantic as well, thank you. Another march that they had in Hartford was Mothers United Against Violence. This was in a march where they're in Hartford and they carry hundreds of crosses. Each one of these crosses is a child or a loved one that was lost to gun violence in Hartford. You can attend a press conference. There's a very good-looking gentleman that is in this photograph here where you can go. You can testify at a public hearing or attend it. And not a lot of people know this. Anyone can attend a public hearing. Anyone can testify. You might be waiting a long time to testify, but it is very worthwhile to do that. It's one of the few opportunities that you really have an opportunity to voice your opinion to your legislators. You can get involved in a campaign. And this brings me to the most important point around here. If you want common sense gun laws to be passed, somebody once said, my predecessor said, that this is not debate class, it's calculus. And what he meant by this is the gun violence prevention issue, we're going to reduce gun violence. It's not about arguing with somebody about the Second Amendment. You don't have to have that argument. If you have representatives, senators that are going to vote for common sense, if you're going to have a president that's going to vote common sense for these things, you don't need to have an argument. You just need their vote. And if they are not going to vote for these things, then you need to vote for people that will vote for them if this is important to you. So this is crucial. Write a letter to the editor, spread the word on social media, attend an event like this today or other events. You can turn your friends into advocates by hosting an event at your house. You don't need a fancy hall. You don't need a library. I tell people, I will come to any home. You just need coffee. And it doesn't even have to be caffeinated. I like to drink tea. So. And you can ask if there's a gun in the home where your children play. And this is really important. Your children are going over to your neighbor's house, and you know your neighbors, you've known them for years. Do you know if they have a gun? Do you know if the person sitting next to you has a gun? Do you know if the person sitting next to you has a gun right now? The answer is you don't. And so I think it's important to not only ask people, I ask the following question. Do you have a gun in your house? Is it locked up? And do your children know where it is? And the interesting thing is, if you ask the parents, do you know where the gun is? They will almost always say, of course they don't, right? If you ask the children, do you know where your parents keep the gun? They will say something like, yeah, it's in the closet underneath my dad's stash, or, I mean, they know where they know, most kids know where guns are. Now, sometimes you grow up in a house where people are like, I didn't know my father owned a gun, or I didn't know my mother owned a gun, or I have no idea. But 9 times out of 10, the kids know where the money is, they know where the car keys are, and they know where your guns are. And that's really important. I mean, you need to know that if you're going to keep a gun in the house, it better be locked up all kinds of ways. Ammunition separate from the gun. It better be a very good lock, because kids can get into it. And the reason why you do that is 1 in 3 homes with children have guns. Many are unlocked or loaded. 3 in 4 children ages 5 to 14 know where firearms are kept. And 80% of unintentional firearm deaths of kids under 15 occur in a home. When I was a prosecutor, somebody pointed this out to me. I worked in DC, and they said the reason why little kids usually who play with guns end up with fatalities so often is little kids cannot pull a trigger with their forefingers. They don't have the strength to do it. And if you ever watch a little kid try to open something, they thumb it. Like they try to open things with their thumbs. And the only one to pull a trigger using your thumbs is to do what? Exactly. So the gun's pointed right at you. So when the kids pull that trigger, they're pulling it with the gun pointed at them. You can spread the word about gun violence protection order to people. You can spread the word about what you heard. You can attend a vigil. This is one of my favorite photos, and it is one of the most, it is the most horrific photo and beautiful photo at the same time. This is the national vigil that was in DC, that Newtown Action Alliance puts on every year. This was the 5th anniversary, that was this past year. And about 3/4 of this audience are survivors of gun violence. About half of the people that are in there are survivors or parents of Sandy Hook, Columbine, Aurora, Orlando. It is like the Hall of Horrors or Hall of Fame of the most horrific events that this country has faced. And these people are heroes to me. I mean, they march on Washington. They advocate for safer laws so that your children don't have to face what their children face. And they live their lives as best as they can day by day, but they are amazing people. I would be curled up in a ball if I faced what these people have faced. And they made, a lot of these people told me that I should say this at almost every function that I'm at, and I never really talked about this until I was at this event. But my uncle killed himself with a gun. And before that, I never really thought of myself as a survivor. And they said, no, not only are you a survivor of gun violence, but you need to tell as many people as you can about what happened, because suicide is one of those stigmas that people don't talk about, and they really should. And as a result, the problem continues. You saw those graphs, you saw the numbers. 2/3 of all gun violence, gun deaths, is suicide. And then Wear Orange, as I said, which is on June 2nd. And I like to leave it with a positive quote. You must be the change you wish to see in the world. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. Yes.
I just want to ask you, I saw this yesterday on Facebook.
Yeah, you get a shirt for asking the first question. See, I told you there were prizes, and you're like,
You did not mention the elephants in the room. 98% of people who commit these violent crimes are male.
You're right.
They're
Well, of which crimes are you talking about? Of the mass shootings?
mass shootings,
Yes.
yes, school shootings.
Yeah, so that's absolutely true. I don't consider that to be the elephant in the room. You're absolutely right. Most of these mass shootings are occurred by white males. Most suicides occur by middle-aged to older white males. And, so it's an interesting issue when you're talking about, white males as being perpetrators of gun violence.
But mental health issues are equally distributed amongst the women in this country, and they do not shoot other people.
Right. And the other thing is that most women who attempt suicide do not use a gun.
That's the
And the issue is, and the interesting thing about guns and suicide, there's this statistic about suicide, which is, it's like 80% of most people who attempt suicide are unsuccessful unless you use a gun, and then it's 80% successful. So, yes, in the back. I'll get to you in a minute.
Yeah, I just had a question. Heather Summers is my state senator, and I wrote to her about the bump stocks, and I was confused with her response. I wonder if you could just clarify how she voted on that legislation.
So she voted no. I'm confused by it too. My understanding of her response, and I don't want to, so don't quote me, but I understand, because I didn't receive the email, and she didn't say this to me directly. But my understanding from the reason why she voted against the bump stock bill was because she felt that the bill was unconstitutional. And the reason, and I'm assuming that the reason why she felt it was unconstitutional was because there was no provision in the bill for a buyback. So, which was purposely done. I did not want a buyback because Connecticut has no money for a buyback. And number two, I didn't want to grandfather in. I did not want these weapons grandfathered in, because if we're going to continue to allow these loopholes to exist and then we're just going to let people keep the loophole item, then we're not prohibiting anything. We're just letting them find another loophole. I'm like, okay, well, you keep those, and then like, all right, well, you found a new loophole, you keep those too, and no. So the interesting thing is that I think what she was saying is that because we were prohibiting, like if I have a bump stock, now all of a sudden I have to destroy it or get rid of it. Is that unconstitutional because it's a violation of the takings clause under the Constitution? And it's not a taking.
But we have multiple candidates running for office. We have at least 3 representatives that I can see, lawmakers that we voted into office that we made. And so I want to give some folks some time, but I will say this, and I stand by this comment I made on Facebook, and that I was disappointed. I think I commented that I was disappointed in Senator Summers' vote against the banning of bump stocks. And I said that publicly on our RiseUpMystic Facebook page. She responded to that. And with a series of responses. And other RiseUpMystic members joined in as well. I don't know if you saw that. It was a pretty interesting exchange. I didn't respond, but I left my comment there and she has since removed hers. I find that interesting. I stand by my disappointment. Having said that, is Dan Kelly here tonight? Okay, we have Bob Stashen. I saw Bob Stashen here, but I invited both candidates who are running against Senator Summers to maybe answer a question that we have for you, if you come on up, or stay there, whatever you're comfortable with. But I want to know what they perhaps would have done. So come on up, Bob, and I'll read the question that I sent, if that's all right.
I got it right here.
You got it right here. Would you like to know what you Bob said, running against Senator Summers?
Yep, I'm Bob Stachin. I'm running for the 18th District Senate seat. And my kids, 16, 14, 12, are doing live fire drills in school, and I'm really angry. They should not be doing that. Something's gone horribly wrong. How many of you were in Stonington at the march? So a lot of people here. You saw Daisy and Hannah and Caroline get up. Those are kids my kids grew up with. They went to Calvary Nursery School all together. And they're up there saying we're unsafe in our schools. We've done something wrong. And I'll also note that Senator Summers was at that same rally, clapping for Daisy, Caroline, and Hannah, and then votes against the bump bill. I'm offended by that. I'm really personally offended by that. She doesn't get to clap for our kids, and then vote against the bump bill like the bump stock bill like that. So my questions, and I know I got 4 minutes. What policy or policies would I propose to support to make Connecticut communities and schools safer? Let me talk about the ones I would not support. No arming teachers. My mother was a pre-kindergarten teacher, and she's not getting armed. You know, my sister's a librarian. Yeah, don't. I'd also say what I'm against is the concealed carry reciprocity, and that's something that's happening to make sure that doesn't happen. And if I'm in the legislature and by some chance it does get through, we got to make sure that our next Attorney General has as much money as they can get to fight that and to make sure that that doesn't come across. I support that 2013 legislation that occurred that put Connecticut on the map for gun control. And in addition to the things that were up there, it created a gun offender registry. It implemented the rules on sales of ammunition. Created mandatory prison sentences for trafficking. Had colleges establish stress assessment teams. There's also restrictions on it as far as the grips, as far as even semi-automatic restrictions. And it also funded mental health. Again, I agree with those rules. What I would propose, and I know Governor Malloy has talked about this, is the multi-state coalitions, and making sure. One of the interesting things and the facts that came up is that, you know, again, we're in the top 5 as far as safest states, and we got New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island right around us. So those coalitions can create a nice area up here, and those coalitions involve sharing data, sharing mental health, background checks, and making sure, because at the federal level there's laws that say they can't even track data, which again is another issue. So we as the state, one of the reasons I'm working for the state legislature is because I think it's all at the state right now as far as what we need to do, because I think the federal government right now is dysfunctional. I would support the restriction on ghost guns as well, and would work on that legislation. And I would say, you know, as far as my candidacy, right now there's 4 attorneys, Democratic attorneys in the state Senate. 3 of them are not running again. So I would be one of the only the only other one would be Senator Looney. I would be one of the only senators there. I would be a senator most likely on the Judiciary Committee, and I think I could have an impact. And I would work with Representative Conley, who's on it now, and I think we could do some good work together. My next question that I got is please comment on your strategy for gaining support of these measures. Before you get too excited, I'm not a pacifist. In another life, I'm a lieutenant colonel in the Connecticut Air National Guard. Let's go back to that Second Amendment slide. I've been part of the well-regulated militia for the past 21 years, and before that I spent 4 years on active duty. I've been trained in a sidearm with a 9mm. The Air Force is funny, they won't train officers on M16s, which is probably a good thing. But I've been, and I've had extensive training, and I understand what that training requires, and I support it. And I also think that training will allow me to make a bridge. Because I think one of the things, we can talk a bit about the NRA. The NRA membership actually at that level, there's good training actually that the NRA does at that lower level. It's the leadership, and it completely makes sense because the leadership is the owners of the industry. And so they're looking to make money. That makes sense. But we got to be careful. Let's not vilify, because I got uncles and cousins and whatnot who are members of the NRA, and they provide decent gun safety training. And we have to differentiate that. We have to differentiate that it makes sense. The leadership is because they're making money on it. I'm a business attorney. I can understand that. I can go there. But again, I think I have the ability to make that bridge. As far as what I would do to support these measures, again, work with law enforcement, work closely with them, work with first responders, making sure what's going to make them safe. What's going to make them safe walking up to a vehicle that they pull over? What's going to make them safe when they get called to a home because something occurred? That's what and how are they going to, and what do they think is important? So work closely with them. Work closely with domestic violence caseworkers. And social workers, because again, a lot of the statistics show many of these incidents occur in that situation. So I think that's something that we can working with social workers, so we can spot situations as far as mental health issues and whatnot, and focusing on that. And also providing financing for school security, and making sure, which is a shame, and but that's where we are right now. So the short-term goal is we don't need it, but the short-term goal is increase school security. The long-term goal is we don't need school security. We can get back to being normal people and having normal schools again. Let's talk a little bit about the election that's coming up. Again, I put out my positions. I've put it out on public radio or public access TV. My opponent hasn't come and responded to these questions. I don't know why, because he's everywhere, believe me. I'm going against him, he shows up everywhere. And maybe there's a good reason, but send him these questions and find out why. We need someone who's got the courage to get up and take a position on this. Who's got the courage to say, no, this is silly, and these are the changes that have to occur. And it's not easy. It's not easy. The 2013 legislation, there were 2 senators that voted against it. I don't have any prizes. I'll give them. Does anybody know who they were? The 2? No, Andy Maynard and Heather Austin. And I love Kathy Austin. And I love Kathy Austin, and she's great. But you know what? It shows it's hard even as a Democrat to really stand up and say, no, we're not, that this can't continue on. So I have a Democratic challenger who isn't here. History shows Democrats in this region, aren't in a position to vote against it. I'm gonna need everyone to help. If this is the candidate you want, you have to help. If you want a candidate who stands for these things, you're gonna have to go out and get 20 of your friends on primary day, because I'm going to need about 4,000 votes for the primary. And you're going to have to show up on election day and bring 40 friends to the polls, because I'm going to need about 15,000 or 16,000 votes on that day. It's, and I talk like this to RiseUpMystic because you guys are motivated and you're out here. But that's what it's going to take. I haven't even talked about, the fact what Senator Summers voted for. And I'll sit down and we can talk constitutional law all night, and it's no. There's not an improper taking that's going on in that bump stock bill. It's unacceptable. I couldn't look my kids in the face if I didn't take this position. But I'll tell you, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. I have a quote from here's the questionnaire I got from the NRA. And their question, and they say, if you choose not to return a questionnaire, you may be assigned a question mark rating, which can be interpreted by our membership as indifference, if not outright hostility, towards Second Amendment related issues. And that's in bold. Okay? You know, and so that's what we're up against. But I think it's time for a change. But it's going to take everybody coming together and working on this election and making sure we get candidates in place who have the courage and the leadership to stand up and do that. I like to think I can do that. At least I would try.
So I won't keep you out. I'll simply say it was Donald Trump that brought us together. Donald Trump and the folks at the national, federal level have motivated us. And so our reaction should be, however, to think local. Let's work locally, let's organize locally. That means coming together all the time. So this is just one more meeting, and we're dug in, and well, I'll see you all in June.